Hello everybody, I'm back here again. Our next chapter is on organizational work conditions, right? So once again, this is for Cambridge A2 level psychology for your organizational psychology module. Let's go on. All right. So following our questions first approach, read some past year questions, keep them in mind, and pick points from the lecture to answer. Okay. So these are two questions from a past year paper. Firstly, explain what is meant by open plan officers. Secondly, describe the findings of the study by Copy, 1989, of a safety promotion campaign to avoid chip pan fires, right? When you see a question that says describe, it's asking you to give details, explain the main features. And if you see a question that says explain, you need to give clear reasons or make clear the meaning of, use examples to indicate how or why something happens, such as the reasoning behind the theory, right? So oftentimes students, when they explain, it's either too brief, right? So for a 2-mark question, you have to give some examples and details of what an open plan office should look like. And for the describe question, it's a 4-mark question, so you need to give as many details as you can remember from the study by Cope. I believe it's pronounced Cope, Cope, I'm not too sure. Anyway, so there are 3 main subcategories: physical and psychological work conditions, category number 1. Number 2 is temporal work conditions, temporal conditions of work environments. And lastly is health and safety. Okay, under the first one, you've got physical, psychological, and open plan officers, right? Under the second one, you've got shift work, effects of shift work on health, and shift work and accidents. And the third one, you've got accidents at work, reducing accidents at work, and safety promotion campaigning, right? It seems like a lot, but as I always tell my students, break it down into its component parts, and it's not as difficult as it looks. Okay, so let's get started. People work harder when conditions are worse, by Jeff Goldblum. What do you guys think? Do you agree to that? Do people work harder in difficult conditions? I don't know. Maybe they do, right? People who are often in, a difficult situation, not difficult situation, but who are surrounded by difficult situations in their workplace, maybe they strive to work harder to make their lives better. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they feel like they're being bullied and they just don't want to do any work, right? So it really depends. Let's move on. All right. So let's focus on the physical side of work, right? We're going to look at a very famous term, right, called Hawthorne. The Hawthorne Effect is in your research methodologies syllabus as well. But we're going to look at the study from which that name came from, right? The Hawthorne Studies by Wickstrom and Bendix. Okay, sorry, let me rephrase that. The Hawthorne Studies are not covered in your syllabus, but what we're looking at is what's the word for it? A analysis of the Hawthorne Studies, which were originally done many years ago. Wickstrom and Bendix in the year 2000, they analyzed it and came up with different or alternative explanations for the study, right? So the Hawthorne Studies was not by Wickstrom and Bendix, right? But we're looking at the analysis that they did on the original study, right? The belief was the Hawthorne Effect, right? Which means that when you investigate something, it changes, right? The thing that you're looking at, right? For example, if a person is at work and their boss is watching them, their productivity is likely to go up because their boss is watching them. That's what the belief was for the Hawthorne Effect, right? But does it really exist? Okay, at first it was believed, but actually not exactly, right? The original study was done by Mayo and a person named Roethlisberger, right, in 1924, at the place called Hawthorne Works in Illinois, USA, right? It was a factory, electricity factory, if I remember correctly, or light bulb factory, something along those lines. All right, so they tested things like manipulating. What they did was they manipulated lighting conditions. They manipulated different working hours, and they manipulated the break times that different staff got. And they wanted to measure their level of productivity, how it would affect their productivity, right? For example, in the lighting condition, in one case, the factory workers had to work in dim lighting. In the other situation, the factory workers had to work in constant bright light, right? What they found was almost no difference, right? Whether it was dim or constant light, there was no difference, right? Only when the light was as dim as moonlight was productivity reduced, right? So what they did was they found that people working in dim light and normal light, they seemed to work with the same level of productivity. They reduced the light until it was so little, it's like as if you're working under moonlight. Only then productivity reduced. So they were confused. They were like, when there's not enough light, productivity should reduce. Why isn't it reducing, right? What's explaining this constant productivity, right? So basically that's the question there. What other variable is contributing to the productivity, right? If you reduce the lighting, they should work, less efficiently, less effectively. But they seem to be producing the same amount of work, right? It's not right. Something else must be happening, right? So that was the assumption. What are the possible other variables? They believed that so the Hawthorne effect was initially believed as because the supervisors were watching them, that's why they improved on their productivity, because they were constantly being watched by people. So even though the lighting was low, they wanted to constantly show that they could do good work, right? But there are alternative variables, right? Such as, for example, the improved relationship between workers and managers, right? So sometimes, the relationship that you have with your staff, right? If you're working under someone and you have a good relationship with your manager, no matter what your circumstances are, you want to please them, you want to do well, right? That's one. Workers also received special privileges, right? So if they worked harder, they got better privileges, which is obviously why you want to work harder, right? So even if the light is dim, you would still work hard to get the privilege, right? Women often worked harder because they wanted to avoid any possible harm from the supervisor for scolding them for working less. And also, this study was done in a period of the Great Depression, where people were out of jobs, out of work. So people who had jobs really worked to keep their jobs, right? And the system at the company was based on an incentive-based system, meaning that the better you work, the more productive you are, the better you're paid, right? So all of these alternative results or alternative explanations do not support the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect is purely if someone is observing you, then you're going to change your behavior. But actually, there's a lot of other factors at play. It could be relationship, it could be the fact that economic situation was bad, and so people worked harder in difficult conditions because they had no choice. They wanted to make sure they had money, right? There was also a lot of lack of experimental control in the original Hawthorne studies, and Wickstrom and Bendix avoid referring to the Hawthorne effect to explain this, right? So some people think that the Hawthorne effect exists, but Wickstrom and Bendix show that actually not really. There are a lot of different reasons as to why people's productivity can be affected. Now let's look at the psychological factors, right? Bullying at work. Who's the researcher in charge of this? Einarsson in 1999. So, question, have you ever been bullied before? Now, I usually ask this to my students, and most of them say yes, in some form or another. I too have been bullied, from time to time when I was in primary and secondary school. Not so much in college and university, but in primary school and secondary school, yes, definitely. Is a typical picture of bullying. You often see bullying in high school or primary school environments, but it's not confined to that only. You also find bullying in the workplace, right? And if you don't teach children not to bully when they're young, you don't teach them to socialize properly, they often end up being bullies when they're older as well. Now, why do people bully? Do you know why? In my opinion, and based on what I've read so far, it's based on power, right? People bully because they want to exert power over someone else. If I'm the bully, I want to show my power over someone else. And oftentimes, it could be because I feel weak on the inside and I want to show myself as powerful. And so I bully other people to feel that sense of power. This is not just bullying, right? It's the same reason behind most rape cases, right? When people get raped, it's less of a sexual act and rather it is a showcase of power of one person over another. And that's what people need to deal with. It's not just, counseling a person because they're addicted to having sex. That's not the problem. Rape is when it's a show of power, right? At least that's my personal opinion. I'm not an expert in the area, but that's as far as I am aware of, right? Oops, sorry. So according to Einarsson, what is bullying, right? The definition of bullying is hostile and aggressive behavior, either physical or non-physical, directed at one or more colleagues or subordinates. It's a pretty general definition, right? That can include anything that basically comes across as hostile, aggressive behavior, right? So, bullying at work, what does it look like? Bullying results in humiliation, offense, and distress. So it's not good, right? It's negative. Nobody wants to get bullied, right? It's not good for us, okay? Work performance becomes reduced, right? So that is a definite big problem, right? It's a negative working environment that people are often stuck in, right? So obviously nobody likes bullying, right? It creates this whole negative environment. Nobody wants to be there, right? 5 types of bullying behavior identified by Zapf as cited in Einarsson, right? So there's work-related bullying, which has to do with things like, for example, your boss changes your task all the time, or they change your task in a way that it makes it harder for you to perform, right? So sometimes bosses, they can do that if they want to bully people, right? Physical violence, right? If you don't finish this by 12 p.m., I will hit you, slap you, make sure you don't go home, right? So that's bullying as well. Verbal threats, criticism, humiliation. Why are you so stupid? Can't you get even a single thing right? Right? So that's humiliating, right? personal attacks, attack your private life, gossip, ridicule. Oh my gosh, did you see what he did on Instagram the other day? Right? Gossip. Hey, I think he's a loser. Oh, I think he doesn't. He doesn't brush his teeth in the morning. I can't even think of anything that negative. I'm such a nice person. Ridicule. Wow, his hair is falling everywhere. He sheds his hair so much. That's because of me. I have a lot of curly hair, but whatever. Right? Social isolation. Separate someone from others. This happened to a friend of mine. Right? A friend of mine was leaving his current workplace, and his boss obviously was not happy with the idea. It's a very toxic work environment. They asked him to, sort of sit in the corner and just shred paper, right? So he felt he was being bullied there and left alone, right? Which is worse, do you think? Being bullied by your boss or being bullied by colleagues? If you were in a work environment, which do you think would be worse? In my opinion, I think being bullied by my colleagues would probably feel worse. I don't know, maybe. I think the reason why is because I come from a Asian culture, and in Asian societies, if your boss bullies a staff, it's usually accepted. It's not good, right? But generally speaking, most Asian societies, we just accept bullying from people who are in power, right? If your boss tells you, you're stupid, then you just take it. But if your friend tells you you're stupid, that really hurts, right? Because they're your friends. Psychological, right? 4 stages of bullying according to Anderson. First, it starts with aggressive behavior, right? What kind of aggressive behaviors have you noticed, right? When people bully you, maybe a push, right? As they're walking past you, they push you, right? Second one is actual bullying. Hey, you better finish this. If not, threatening them, bullying them, criticizing them. Third is stigmatization, right? People start to avoid you. Hey, this guy, he's just so stupid. He can't get anything right, right? And then finally is severe trauma. So this builds up over time and becomes very traumatic. The person may start feeling very anxious, go into panic attacks, right? They may start shaking when they see their bully appear. That happens often for bullied victims, right? They feel a sense of incredible stress and panic when their bully appears in front of them or they see a picture of the bully, right? So violence often starts small and it grows, right? So keep this in mind. Violence starts small. And if you're in a relationship with someone, if you're in or in an office with someone, whatever it is, right? When you're dealing with people, if they show violence in the simplest form, you need to call it out. You need to confront it. You need to confront it immediately, because if you don't, it can grow, right? It starts small, right? In a relationship, for example, oftentimes you'll find cases where women deal with abuse. Men also, right? Men also get abused, but let's just use a woman getting abused as an example. And it doesn't start with a slap, right? Husbands don't immediately just start beating up their wives, right? It starts small. It starts with shouting. It starts with slamming a door, right? It starts with pushing, shoving, and then later, finally, actual physical violence, right? So it starts small, and you need to stop it when it's small. It's easy to, do. Okay, when someone gets bullied, is it their fault for not standing up? What do you think? If you're being bullied, shouldn't you stand up for yourself? Right? Shouldn't you? What do you think? Think about that for a minute. I showed this anime clip to my students. I don't think I can show you the full clip. I'll just show like a little bit. Okay. Sorry, no? Oh, I didn't put it in. This comes from an anime called Attack on Titan, Shingeki no Kyojin. I love the show. It's really, really very interesting. If you've never seen it before, do try and catch it online. I think it's on Netflix. Yeah, it's on Netflix as well. This is basically the scene where these bullies are bullying the girl's brother. Right, the brother's not in the scene. The girl's there on the left. Right, she's the one here on the left, Mikasa. And this guy was one of the bullies bullying her brother. Her brother's somewhere here on the floor. And then he doesn't fight very well. So they were initially bullying another boy, and that boy doesn't put up a fight, right? And then another guy comes in and tries and helps that friend, stands up for him, and he gets walloped, right? He gets whacked really hard. And then the girl comes in and wallops the bullies, and she just totally floors them, right? She's like a professional wrestler. And so I asked my students, who is the real bully here? Is it the boys who bullied in the beginning? Most people would say yes. But what about the girl who completely, utterly humiliated them in front of everyone? Should she bear any blame for being bullied? Is it okay to stand up for yourself? Yes. Is it okay to hurt other people when you're standing up for yourself? I don't know. That can be quite subjective. It really depends on the situation, right? And what if you have so much more power than the bully and you hurt them more than they hurt you? That's interesting question to think about. I don't have the answers, only the questions. Okay, moving on. So what are the causes of bullying? What makes people bully, right? Individual factors, for example, the personality, right? Some personality traits perhaps could contribute to bullying. Your syllabus does not go into the detail of what personality traits may be correlated with bullying, but definitely if a bully comes with people who are stubborn, angry, prone to lashing out, stuff like that. Personality of the victim as well, right? Now, from what I read in your A-level syllabus, I believe it's people who appear as weak or people who appear as unable to stand up for themselves. That can also, in a sense, invite bullying. It causes bullying because it sort of like tells the bullies, hey, I'm weak, you can take advantage of me. Now, if you're big, strong, and you give off an aura of strength and confidence, bullies are not likely going to find you, right? They're going to find people who are weak. Situational factors, circumstances, for example, competition, right? Let's say you're working in a work environment that pays people based on a commission basis. So the more sales that you make, the more commission you get, right? So it's a competition between you and everybody else in the company. Everybody needs to sell, for example, insurance, right? Insurance agencies are often like this. It's based on commission, right? The more insurance sales you make, the higher your pay. But you're fighting against every other insurance agent, right? You've also got psychosocial factors. Now, psychosocial factors are, for example, psychological factors and social factors together, right? It could be an influence of the social factors around you and how it affects your mind, right? So oftentimes people in a difficult situation, let's say, for example, we're going to COVID-19, the pandemic in COVID-19, it's a really difficult situation for all of us. Everybody's stressed and overworked, and that can cause people to lash out, right? People to bully others, right? Because they just can't handle the stress. Okay. Causes of bullying by Djokovic. I'm not sure I pronounced that name. Apologize. So this person did a survey-based study, right, where they surveyed employees in a Finnish university in Finland. They found three main perceived reasons for bullying, right? A was competition, right? So if it's a competitive environment, people bully because they want a higher position or status. B is because of envy. People are envious of what other people have. Wow, that person drives a Mercedes. I'm so envious. I want to bully him, right? And thirdly is aggressor being uncertain of their abilities. I think this has to do with, I think if I'm not mistaken, it has to be with the bully, for example, the aggressor or the bully, the person who shows aggression. That person is uncertain of themselves. That they don't know their true ability and they feel probably a bit inferior in some ways, and so they lash out and attack. Another significant factor that they found was that the personality of the victim actually seems to play a role, right? So many of the people that they surveyed actually pointed, not many, I mean, some of them pointed out that people bully because of the victim. In a sense, I have to be careful with how I phrase this, that in a sense, blaming the victim for the causes of bullying, right? Which by right shouldn't really be the case, right? If a bully bullies, the bully should be at blame, right? But in spite of that simple logic, people do seem to agree in this research that actually the personality of the victim plays a role, right? So, if I had to suggest something, I would suggest, be assertive, be confident, so people don't take advantage of you and bully you. What do you think is the difference between envy and jealousy? They're very similar terms, right? Envy and jealousy, that's a very famous meme that you can see, right? So the girlfriend on the right, is she feeling envious or is she feeling jealous? What do you think? So in this case, when it's a relationship-based, it's usually jealousy, right? She's jealous that he's checking her out, right? Here's an example. Oh no, the picture is a bit pixelated. You can't really read it. Okay, let me read it out for you. It says, Kate's innocent flirting sent her boyfriend into a jealous rage, right? So Kate is this girl over here. She's flirting with this random guy, and this is Kate's boyfriend, and he's jealous that she's flirting with him, right? They're already in a relationship, but she's going out and flirting with another guy. He's getting jealous. So in a relationship, it's usually jealousy. Whereas in this case, Tracy was envious that Lauren won the trophy, right? So Lauren got something that Tracy doesn't have. She feels envious. In this case, this guy already has the girlfriend, right? So now he feels jealous. She doesn't have the trophy. She feels envious. So that's kind of the difference. But something you already have and something you don't have. Okay. Now, let's look at differences between victims of bullying versus non-victims. Victims are more prone to being angry and sensitive after getting bullied. They are more prone to being very suspicious. They don't trust other people because they're bullied. They also have a very low sense of self-esteem, right? Because people bully them, call them stupid, so they feel a very low sense of self-esteem. They don't feel good about themselves. And oftentimes also very anxious in social situations. Why? Because they've been bullied before, so they feel a lot more anxiety, right? Now, is this a causal relationship? Can we say that bullying causes low self-esteem? Bullying causes anger. Bullying causes suspicion. Bullying makes people more anxious. We can't say that, right? We can't say that because to experimentally test for that means that we have to use an IV of bullying and make people undergo bullying, harsh bullying, and see what happens. That would be extremely unethical, right? So the most we can do is to do a correlational study, right, or observation, surveys, but we can't really establish a causal effect. It's possible. It's possible, right? Because some people, excuse me, let me rephrase that. It's possible it's not causal because some people are naturally more anxious than others, right? Maybe not a result of bullying, but so you have to be careful. So to ask yourself this question, do weak personalities cause bullying, or does bullying cause weak personalities? How do you prove that? It's a bit hard to experimentally test. Okay, these are often more towards individual factors, as you can see, right? All these effects that people go through. Okay, so what are situational? Sorry, let me rephrase what I just said. Right, so things like sorry, where am I? Sorry, I think I made a slight mistake. Let me rephrase what I just said. So please forget what I said for the past few minutes. What I wanted to say was that what researchers have found is that people who get bullied tend to exhibit these individual factors, right? So people who get bullied tend to be people with a lower sense of self-esteem, tend to be people who are more anxious in social situations, right? So these are individual factors of the victim that seems to suggest that people who have these factors tend to get bullied more. Whereas people who are in the, so these are situational factors, for example, what are the situations that promote or allow bullying? A deficiency in work design, so when work has not been designed properly, if your boss doesn't know how to schedule your work or plan for it properly, you may feel bullied, right? Or it results in bullying because you just end up suffering, right? Or deficiency in leadership behavior, if the situation has a bad leader involved, then the leader might end up bullying you. Or a socially exposed victim, for example, people who are from minority groups, or perhaps if you're the only woman working in an all-male office, you may feel overpowered or bullied, right? Or low morale in the department. Let's say, for example, the company is shutting down. So I once had to be the master of ceremonies for a company that was shutting down, and everybody was going to be fired the following week, and I had to give them a fun, entertaining evening. It was one of the toughest jobs I've ever done, but that's a situational factor, right? That can result in bullying, right? If low morale is in the department, people might bully more, right? So these are situational factors that result in bullying oftentimes. Okay, previously was individual factors that a victim has, right? Like low self-esteem, that often seems to result in bullying towards them. Is all bullying the same? According to Einarsson, no. There are different types of bullying. All bullying is not the same, right? So what are the types of bullying? There's predatory bullying. This has to do with things like, for example, when a victim does not trigger the bully just is like a predator, just watching, waiting to pounce and bully the person. But the victim didn't do anything, right, to trigger that event. The predator is just demonstrating that power by bullying them. Another type of bullying is called institutional harassment. This is a culture of bullying that's ingrained in an organization. For example, let's say you're the first woman employee in an all-male office that has always been all males, and then you might feel bullied, right? Because that's just the culture that company had, that only males can do this job. What is this woman doing here, right? For example, right? Scapegoating is another form of bullying. Scapegoating is when people are highly stressed, they take it out on someone else, or they use someone else to take the blame, right? It's oftentimes an explanation for prejudice. Or he didn't do this work because he's, of this racial category, right? So you blame someone, you scapegoat someone to take the blame for you. That's the meaning of a scapegoat, right? It comes from a biblical story where in the Bible, for example, when the priests want to cleanse the people of their sins, they would put their hands on a goat and in a sense transfer the sins of the people onto the goat and let the goat walk out into the wild and die later on, right? So that's called the scapegoat. The goat takes the sins of the people. In the case of a work environment, someone else takes the blame for your mistakes, for example, or you blame someone out of prejudice. Okay, in an organization some organizations tolerate bullying, right, and that's a bad thing. Some do not tolerate bullying, and it's a good thing. And in some cases where organizations that do tolerate bullying, what happens is that they don't have any procedures to protect people against bullying, but they should, right? So in the university that I was teaching in previously, Sunway University in Malaysia, they have a student welfare department, and you can see there, it says some of the situations that we can assist and advise on is abuse, bullying and harassment, victim of crime, disability, emergency, and so on. So bullying and harassment is one of them, right? So if you're feeling, as a student, if you feel bullied, you should go to the student welfare department and ask for advice and help. Hey, I'm being bullied. He's making fun of me. I feel really bad. I feel like committing suicide. Can you help me? And they're always ready to help. That's the whole reason why they are there, right? You should reach out to them, okay? And so usually university environments, they always have some kind of a department to help students with this, right? And oftentimes bullying can be very subtle. For example, nobody says, I'm racist, but it's a lot easier to say, he can never do his job right. But behind that statement is a racist behavior, right? Or prejudice behavior. Okay, so people often have an anti-bullying policy in offices, for example. Oh, sorry, I didn't put it in. Right, so you can usually find an anti-bullying policy of some kind in the office that you're working in the company that you work for. There usually is, in most modern companies, there's usually some kind of policy to help people against bullying, right? Okay, let's talk about open plan offices, right? This was by Oldham and Brass in 1979. Okay, open versus closed. On the left side, you see what is known as an open office. There are no barriers. Versus on the right side is all in cubicles, all closed. What do you prefer? What do you guys think? Do you prefer an open office or a closed office? For me, personally, it's hard to choose. I kind of prefer a closed office because when I want to work, I want peace and quiet. I don't want people to disturb me, right? And I prefer to work in a slightly more closed office, right? But what do you think? Which one is more effective? Well, we're going to find out. So many office organizations changed over the years to open office layouts. Traditionally, offices were usually closed style, and then many of them over the time moved to open office layouts because that seemed trendy, seemed popular, right? But field studies have shown us that employee satisfaction actually drops when people move to open plan offices, right? From closed to open, people are less satisfied. So there was a study done on a large newspaper office in the US, right? Where initially the newspaper office had closed office cubicles and a lot more private spaces for people. Whereas, for example, in a private space, you have to walk out of your space to talk to a colleague, right? So everybody has their own little privacy. Management had already planned to change offices. So the researchers did not force the company to change from a closed to open. Their management was already planning to do it. So this was what is known as a field study because there was no manipulation. What happened was the reason why the management had to change offices was because their original office were very far from a railway, so it increased the cost of transporting the newspapers, right? It also lacked air conditioning and heating in the old office, so they wanted to move to a better office, and there was limited storage space, so they wanted to move to a bigger office, right? Now, they thought that the current closed layout was not conducive for communication because everybody's in their own private cubicle. There's no communication going on. Everybody's just working on what they're doing, right? So they thought that closed offices was not good because it doesn't promote open communication. What do you guys think? Now, there was a video that I showed my students online. You can find this video by PBS. Just go to PBS NewsHour, look for open closed offices, and you can probably find it. Very interesting video. They discuss a lot of the research that has been done on office spaces. You might be surprised to find the results. But let's look at what Oldham discovered. Okay, before that, this was my first office desk job, right? My first job after I graduated, fresh out of university. I worked in my church office for a year to serve 1 year, to my church. And this was my office. I was a social media and communications executive. I was in charge of preparing bulletins, printing out stuff, preparing slides, videos, and stuff like that, all the multimedia, and updating a church app. So this is my very clean-looking desk. I tried to keep it neat and clean as much as possible. And I enjoyed working at this desk. I kept it clean, always cleaned it at the end of the day. And you can see it's all pretty nice and organized, right? At the end of my 1 year, this is what my desk looked like. Plates stacked up, clothes on the chair, stuff on the side, goodness knows what half the things are, and it just became a dumpster ground for stuff, right? So I kind of became lazy, but I made sure once I finished my career, I left it in a good environment, right? But as you can see, there is a little barrier here, right? So it wasn't really closed, so it was open in the sense that the person next to me, there's no barrier, but there are barriers between people, right? So there's a little barrier here, but there's no barrier here, and there's no barrier here, right? So here nothing, but here there's a barrier. So it's partially closed in that sense. I do get some privacy, but not much. So it's like halfway in between closed and open. It was all right for me, right? This was my last day of work, right? When I was leaving, so it was a fun office environment, right? In the sense, I love it being open. So this guy, his name is Jeremy, Pastor Jeremy. He put on an afro and we took a picture together. My afro is original. His one was a wig. I should point that out. And it's so having an open office is great because everybody, we are just having fun. We can communicate, talk to each other, and if someone's doing something funny, we can all join in along. A closed office, wouldn't allow us such fun times. This is my friend Shanette. She was one of my colleagues. She sat next to me, and it was rather sad when we were leaving and we had to pack up all our stuff and leave. So in a sense, the open office environment did help. But at the same time, when you want to get work done, you want a closed space. Right? We also had the Office Anaconda. Okay, I don't know if can I play this video? This is the roof of our office. You can see this thing. It's the air conditioning unit. Let me see if I can play it. Hit it. Whoa, look at that. Boom. Okay. That's my friend Sean. So yeah, I call that the Office Anaconda. It's one of the one of the fun things, when sometimes when you work in an office, you get these little perks and idiosyncrasies, and this is the Office Anaconda, as we fondly called it, that provides the air conditioning to the whole room. Anyway, I miss that office. It was fun working there in my church. All right, so let's go on to open plan offices. Okay. So the new office, which remember the newspaper office we were looking at? So the newspaper company, they moved to a new office using an open plan design. No cabinets, no walls in between people, no partitions more than 1 meter high. And this time it was next to a railway. No private offices as well, only 2 meeting rooms. Everybody was in this open environment. Different departments were still grouped together in their own little areas, but everything was still open, right? Amount of space was roughly the same as the old office. They did have a natural control group. What this means is that the press room staff, so there was a group of people known as the press room staff. I believe they have to do with the printing of the papers. They were in a closed office environment. So they were still in their traditional closed environment. Everybody else was in the open environment. Only these people were in the closed environment. So they present what is known as a natural control group. The researcher didn't force them, right? It was just naturally, they probably, for the nature of their work, they needed to be in a closed space. So they function as a control group. So now we can see, are the people in this group happier and more productive, or the people in the open plan design happier and more productive? Why are control groups important, right? So oftentimes we forget that control groups are important because we need to compare the experimental group to a control group. If you don't have a group to compare against, then you don't know whether the IV is actually having an effect or is it something else, right? If I have 2 groups and one group has the IV and one group doesn't have the IV, if this group has an effect, then I know it's due to the IV, right? Whereas if this group and this group has an effect, then something else must be affecting both groups, right? Without the control group, I wouldn't know that the IV is having an effect. Okay. Moving on. Staff were all informed about the study. They agreed that the old building was not suitable anymore and they needed to move. The only change was the office layout, salary, hours, and contracts all remained the same. So this was all kept constant, and that's a good thing, right? You want all the other factors to remain consistent, except one, which is the IV. In this case, is the office layout from closed to open. Data was collected at the offices themselves. T1 is known as time 1. So they took 8 weeks before the move. They did a survey and they asked questions to the staff. And then after 9 weeks after the move, they asked more questions. So time 1, time 2. 8 weeks before, 9 weeks after, is there a difference? Oh, they did another one, time 3, which was 18 weeks after the move. So it's a longitudinal study, right? Multiple data measurement points. What did they find? The aim, was to assess employees' reactions to new office and work. Okay, data was collected via a questionnaire, groups of 2 to 12 people doing the questionnaire together, right? Work satisfaction, interpersonal satisfaction, internal work motivation. So these were the things that they were measuring in the questionnaire. How satisfied are you? How satisfied are you in terms of your relationships with others at work? How motivated are you for your work? They were they were asked to write their names, but they were given assurance of confidentiality. Now, why do you think this was necessary? It was necessary. They had to write their names because they took 3 data points, right? 1, 2, 3. So you want to make sure that the same person here is the same person here is the same person here. They kind of have to write their names and match them up. But at the same time, the researchers told them that don't worry, your results are confidential. We won't tell your bosses. Okay. Informal questioning was used between the management and the staff who provided feedback as well. Right. So this was informal, where they just ask questions like to the management staff, hey, how are things going? What feedback do you have? And stuff like that. Okay. Sample size was 140 participants, mostly based on 76 people. and a control group of 5 people, right? Remember, there was the press room control group. So although there are 140 participants, they said mostly based on statistics, which indicates that some of the participants dropped out, perhaps didn't complete the questionnaire. Okay. Hypothesis: they hypothesized that there will be increase in productivity and satisfaction because supervisors and co-worker feedback would increase, friendship opportunities should increase, intra and interdepartmental interaction should increase. But nope, that was not true, right? So they believe, remember, people believe that if you had an open plan office, that people can communicate, hey, people can communicate with each other. So they believe that feedback would improve, opportunities for friendship would improve, interaction would improve. Nope, that was not what they found, right? They found that motivation and satisfaction decreased. People were not happy, they were not motivated, right? In the control group, however, no changes. So people who were in the closed environment, they did all right. They had no change. Interviews, the workers felt like they were in a fishbowl, right? Everybody is in a fishbowl. Everybody is here. Everybody can see each other, talk to each other. There's no privacy. It was difficult for them to concentrate and complete a task. They can't develop friendships properly. Why? Because everybody can hear what you're saying. You can't really develop a personal friendship with someone if everybody's listening in, right? Inviting someone for dinner, the whole office can hear you. What's the point, right? If you want to make friends with someone, you want to invite them over for a meal, but the whole office can hear you, you should invite the whole office for a meal, right? It feels embarrassing when everybody can hear you. Supervisors found it difficult to give feedback as well without a private room involved, right? So giving feedback without a private room, that can be quite embarrassing and humiliating for someone, right? If you want to give them feedback, even if it is positive, right, it can be quite difficult if you want to do it privately. So physical office space makes a big difference in companies, right? And this is the kind of real life application that psychologists can contribute to society by helping plan better office spaces, right? Okay, let's test your research method knowledge. What type of experiment was this? What kind of experiment was this? Can you remember? Okay, ask yourself, was there any manipulation? No. Was it done in a laboratory? No. Right? So it was a natural experiment. Oh, sorry, I went too far. So it was a natural experiment. Right? I don't think I put the answer there. Natural natural experiment, right? Because there was no manipulation by the researcher. Okay. So let's evaluate. Physical studies, field experiment, good ecological validity but lacks control, right? So the Hawthorne studies that were done, it was a field experiment, so that's good because it was done in an actual, factory, but it lacked a lot of control and there were a lot of issues that Wingstrom and Bendix pointed out. Does the Hawthorne effect even exist? According to Wingstrom and Bendix, not really, right? There are so many alternative explanations that the Hawthorne studies don't provide a very strong evidence, right, for the Hawthorne effect. Bullying at work, individual versus situational. So there are some individual factors that contribute to bullying. There's some situational factors that contribute to bullying. Right? You can talk about both. Open plan offices was done via a natural experiment because there's no manipulation involved. But you're comparing against two groups, right? Good ecological validity because it's done in a real life environment, but it also lacks control, right? Anytime you do an experiment outside of the laboratory, you lack control, right? And also the control group only had 5 people. So that's a bit of a difficulty when comparing 5 to 76 or more, right? It's not very equal. Also, they didn't measure productivity and efficiency. They measured satisfaction and stuff. Satisfaction, I believe. Yeah, satisfaction and interpersonal relationships, mainly. They didn't actually measure whether people are more productive and producing work or more efficient, right? They just measured in terms of relationships. Will it still be negative after 18 weeks? How about a year later? So this is one of the things about longitudinal studies. When do you stop measuring? 18 weeks, is a fairly long period of time, right? It's, a few months. But what about 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Would people develop their own ways of adapting to an open office plan? Would they be able to enjoy it after 1 year? We don't know. Okay. So we've covered the first part. Let's move on to temporal conditions. Now, what does temporal mean? The word temporal here means to referring to time as opposed to eternity, right? So it's just basically, temporal just means referring to time, something to do with time, right? Relating to time, okay? All right, so temporal is all about day and night, time, the time between when you work, day and night, right? Some people work in the day, some people prefer to work at night. I prefer to work at night. Currently, as I'm talking to you, I'm recording this video at 1:21 in the morning, 1:21 a.m. I sleep late, right? Often I'm a night owl. Okay, so shift work. What is shift work? Shift work is to do with temporal conditions or the time conditions for people's work, right? So shift work is when, some people work in the day, some people work in the night shift. Day shift, night shift, that's how we usually refer to it. So different time conditions. Now, What jobs have night shifts? What jobs are you familiar with that have night shifts? Night shifts. For example, a security guard. Security guards often work at night because they have to make sure the building is secure. Healthcare, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Hospitals have to be open all the time. Someone has to work at night. Leisure and retail, a lot of places are now, working 24 hours a day. Now, of course, with COVID-19 pandemic, not so much. In Malaysia, there are mamak shops. Mamak shops are restaurants that open for 24 hours. Shopee is an online shopping platform. Games, right? Gaming devices and platforms are open 24/7, right? Shift work is working patterns that are not the same every week, right? So shift work is when sometimes you work in the day, sometimes you work at night. For example, in 24 hours, you might work a morning shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., an afternoon shift, 2 to 10 p.m., and a midnight or overnight shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And then someone else comes in the morning, right? So this was me at my job. That's me, Ross. This is my friend Juan from Argentina. And I was working in the US. So if you follow my videos on YouTube, you know that I was working in the United States as a food service staff at the YMCA of the Rockies. Beautiful place in Colorado. And I had to work shift work, right? So sometimes I would work in the daytime, as you can see outside here in the window. Sometimes I work in the daytime. Sometimes I would work in the nighttime. It really depends, right? So I had shift work. You can see here, right? That's me, Ross Stevenson. And my shift work, for example, here on Mondays, I work in the AM. We call them the AM shift, 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. On Wednesdays, I work the night shift, which was 12:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Right? On Thursday, night shift again. Friday, night shift again. And on Tuesday, I worked in the AM. I loved working in the AM because after 2:30, I got the rest of the day to myself. I did not enjoy working at the night shift. Even though it was more relaxed, it was less enjoyable. Right, I much preferred working in the morning. Everybody did, right? So all of these other people are my friends, so we would take turns, right? So this was shift work, right? A real example of shift work. Okay, there's a theory called rapid rotation theory. It's by Pheasant, 1991. Rapid rotation theory suggests that it's important to manage shift work for people to help reduce negative effects, right? Shift work can have negative effects. Like I just mentioned, I love working in the morning. I don't like working at the night. I prefer to have the night to relax to myself. And if I have to work every single night all the time, what happens? I don't enjoy my work as much, right? Rapid rotation shifts, okay? Frequent shift changes. This can be a problem. Monday work in the morning, Tuesday work at night. Wednesday work in the morning, Thursday work at night. That can be very, very difficult, right? So there's what is known as the metropolitan rota or metropolitan rotation. Rota is rotation. 2 shifts in the day, 2 shifts at the afternoon, 2 shifts at night, 2 off days, right? So this repeats. For 2 days in the week, Monday and Tuesday, you work in the daytime. Wednesday to Thursday, you work in the afternoon. Friday to Saturday, you work at night. Sunday and Monday is off day, and so on and so forth, and you repeat, right? The continental rota is slightly different. You've got 2 day shifts, and then the next 2 days is twilight shifts. I forgot what time is twilight. It's like evening shift. And then finally a night shift for 3 days, and then 2 off days, right? And then you followed by another 2 days in the day, 3 days of twilight shift, 2 days of night shift, and 3 days of off day. Don't ask me why, but your syllabus requires you to memorize this. It has come on in the exams before, so take my word for it. Memorize what the metropolitan rota looks like. Memorize what the continental rota looks like. So for example, on Monday and Tuesday, you work in the daytime. Wednesday, Thursday, you work in twilight, which I think is evening, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you work at night. And then you get 2 off days on Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday and Thursday in the daytime. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, twilight. And then Monday and Tuesday at night. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you get 3 off days. So that's how it works. Honestly, just memorize this. It comes on the exam sometimes, so just memorize it. I don't know why this is the way it is. Honestly, I think it's complete nonsense and doesn't make sense to me, but whatever, right? Now, what effects might occur from rapid shift changes, right? Let's look at that. Slow rotation shifts are good because their changes are infrequent, right? So you don't change as often. Maybe for 2 weeks you work in the day, and the next 2 weeks you work at night. So for 2 weeks at a time, you work in one particular shift, and that's okay. It doesn't change so often. Several weeks day shift, several weeks night shift, that's fine. It's better for your circadian rhythm, right? Because you can adapt more easily, right? Your body has a circadian rhythm of 24 hours, a 24-hour body clock that you have. And if you upset this clock, it can have negative health consequences on you, right? It's easier to adapt if you do something the same way for 1-2 weeks, right? Rather than every day changing. It reduces negative health outcomes, right? If you try to interfere with your circadian rhythm, it can affect your health. So be careful. Let's look at the effects on health by Knudsen. So according to Knudsen, some studies say that there's no evidence to suggest that shift work affects longevity, meaning how long you live for. They compared mortality rates, the death rates between daytime workers and shift workers. And in the UK, they didn't find a significant difference. So that's interesting, right? Some people believe that there is a difference, but some studies show that no, actually it's fine. Whether you work in the daytime or whether you work a shift, sometimes in the day, sometimes at night, doesn't seem to make a difference. But in Denmark, another study found a tiny increase in the death risk for shift workers. So people who constantly shift from day, night, they have a slight risk of death. Right? These were all correlational studies, so you can't say that there's causation, it's just correlational. There were other studies that do suggest certain diseases increase in shift work. For example, gastrointestinal disease affecting your intestines, your stomach. Shift workers get worse diseases, constipation, diarrhea, especially for night workers. Hepatic ulcers, duodenal ulcers, these are part of the stomach. Taxi drivers suffer from this, truck drivers, factory workers, night watchmen. A lot of them have gastrointestinal diseases. Cardiovascular, heart problems. Shift work causes problems such as heart attack. Or it could be due to things like the chemicals you work with, the noise, vibration, stress. So, all of these during your work can affect you as well. Increased risk of breast cancer for women, especially in the night shift. Nurses, flight attendants, radio operators. Oftentimes, these people seem to have higher risks of breast cancer. But you can't control for possible exposure to carcinogens, right? Carcinogens are anything that can cause cancer to happen. So oftentimes, like for example, people who work on aeroplanes late at night, they're often exposed to jet fuel and stuff like that. So that's not good, right? The exhaust fumes could be a possible carcinogen, right? So evidence is inconclusive, right? People who suffer from diabetes, right? Diabetes risk increases. Body chemicals such as potassium, uric acid, glucose, cholesterol seem to be higher in people who do night shift work, right? BMI is also higher in people with night shift, but evidence is inconclusive. So in some cases, people do show that's evidence, but in some cases, not so strong yet, right? For people who want to get pregnant, you better be careful. If you do shift work, you might have low birth weight for your baby. Premature birth and miscarriages are also often seen for people who do shift work, right? The circadian rhythm gets interrupted, right? When you do shift work, taking medicine at different times causes different effects as well. So if you're on medication, but you do shift work, sometimes you work in the day, sometimes at night, sometimes in the day, sometimes at night, you may need to adjust your medication schedule and that could affect you, right? Sleep deprivation is also bad for health. It can result in epilepsy, seizures, asthma, right? I often suffer from this a lot because I work a lot at night, sometimes all the way up until 5, 6 a.m. before I sleep, and then I wake up the next day in the afternoon, right? So that's not good. It's not healthy. I don't promote the lifestyle, but I can only record my videos at night because everybody else in my family is asleep. Otherwise, it's really noisy at home. So, I sacrifice a lot of my health for you guys, but, I hope you guys appreciate it. Such is life. About accidents, let's look at some accidents that happen. According to Gold et al., this study that was done, they did a survey of nurses in Massachusetts from the month June to September 1986. They wanted to see the effect of shift work on sleep and accidents, right? It was a self-administered questionnaire. They gave it to these nurses. They gave 878, only 687 returned. The mean age of the nurses was 33.9 years, right? So people either had variable shifts or same shifts, right? So the nurses had to decide. On the current week, they were asked to record how many days. How many days in the week did you work in the daytime? How many days in the week did you work in the evening? How many days in the week did you work at night? Right? For the previous 2 weeks, how many times did you work in the day, evening, or night? For the following week, are you going to work in the day, evening, or night shifts? Right? They also asked the nurses to record their sleep and wake times on shift days and also on their off days. They also asked them to comment on their quality of sleep. How good quality was your sleep last night, right? Or for the days. They also commented on the use of alcohol, right? How much alcohol did you use on the days, right, of the study? Did you use any medication? That was also recorded. Did you use sleeping aids to help you sleep? And how many number of times had you fallen asleep at work in the past 1 week, right? As well as how many accidents or errors did you make when driving, giving out medication and making an error, your job procedure, doing something wrong at job, or getting into a work-related injury. Let's say the nurse has to cut something, they cut themselves by accident, but it must be due to sleepiness. So you were sleepy and then you made a problem or you made a mistake, right? How many of that happened? So they asked a lot of questions in the survey, a lot, right? The nurse was also asked, does your job involve a variable work shift, right? What is variable work shift? So what does this mean, right? That is, do you work the day shift sometimes and the night shift at other times, right? Which is a National Center for Health Statistics question previously used to identify shift workers in the US population. So how do you identify a shift worker? You ask them this question. Does your job involve variable work shift? Which means that sometimes you work in the day, sometimes you work at night. Or if you only work in the daytime, that's not variable. If you only work at night, that's not variable. For a variable work shift, you must work in the day and sometimes in the night at other times. Okay? Okay, they divided into three groups. The day and evening workers were put into one group. Okay, the night shift workers were also in one group, and the rotators, those who frequently change between day and night, they were placed into one group. Okay, the reason why, I'm trying to remember why they put the day and the evening workers in one group instead of two different groups. If I remember correctly, it is because when people shifted from day to evening shifts in this particular survey, no, not in this survey, research suggested, I believe, that this group has similar circadian rhythms, so there's no problem there. The circadian rhythm is only affected for people who work on rotation or only people who work at night, right? For people who work in the day and then work in the evening at other times, their circadian rhythm doesn't seem to be affected. Excuse me, I'm wrong. Forget that. Evening and night is different, right? So night is like really like in the middle of the night, like midnight and above, or somewhere close to midnight. Evening is just like twilight, right? They're working in the evening. Day and evening people, they work similarly in the daytime. So it's not nighttime yet, it's just evening. They don't have a problem with their circadian rhythms. People who are like night shift workers and rotators, they have a problem with their circadian rhythms. That is why the day and the evening were combined instead of separating them into two groups. Okay. Anchored sleep. What is anchored sleep? 4 more hours of sleep. Anchored sleep refers to having 4 or more hours of sleep on a work day or on an off day. So if you're working on a Monday and you had 4 hours of sleep, proper, like uninterrupted sleep, then that will be considered anchored sleep. If it's your off day, like a Saturday or Sunday, and you had 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, that will be considered anchored sleep on off day, right? It has to be the same clock hours at night, right? So it can't be 2 hours at night and then 2 hours in the morning. 2 hours at. I think it has to be in one night. If that's what I think that's what they meant, right? It has to be all together in one night. Why day and evening together? This was because their circadian rhythms don't show much difference. Okay, what type of study is this? Oops, sorry, I revealed the answer. It's a quasi-experimental study. Can you explain why? It's quasi-experimental because the groups were naturally occurring, right? So it's still experimental because I have an IV that I'm looking at, right? The 3 different groups of nurses. But it's quasi because these are natural groups, right? I don't manipulate these 3 groups. They already exist. Okay, so what about anchor sleep? People who got 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Rotators and night shift workers had less hours of sleep versus day and evening workers. So remember the first group, right? These people working the day and evening, they had no problem with anchored sleep. Rotators and night shift workers have problems with anchored sleep, right? They get less hours of sleep. People in the day and evening work, they get 92% of anchor sleep, so that's good. Right? Night shift workers, only 6.3%. So there's a big difference, right? People who work in the daytime, only great sleep. People who work at night, not very good sleep. Rotators got 0 anchor sleep. So people who rotate shift a lot, they don't really sleep for 4 hours uninterrupted properly, right? Anchor sleep regularly throughout the month. So they measure this regularly throughout the month. All nurses who identified with having shift work, 53.6% experienced anchor sleep disruption. So within 4 hours of sleep, there was some problem. Discrepancy in the textbook. Okay, so this is a little bit confusing for me. It says here, anchor sleep disruption was experienced by 49% of the day-evening workers, 94% of the rotators, and 2.9% of the night nurses. Of the nurses who answer yes to categories of the NCHS questionnaire on the variable work schedules, only 53.6% experienced anchor sleep disruption. The group responding yes included 49.4% of the day-evening nurses, 94.1% and 2.9% of night nurses. Okay, anyway, I find it a little bit confusing between both of these. So what I usually suggest students to do is just, if you want to just look at the textbook, I think the textbook puts it fairly easy to understand. If you're not sure, you can look at the original, but I found that these 2 definitions, although they look similar, seem a little bit different to me. I haven't figured it out yet. If you can figure it out, let me know in the comments below. If not, just memorize either one and I think it should be fine. Okay. Results for quality of sleep. Night nurses were 1.8 times more likely to report poor quality sleep. Right? So people who worked at night, poor quality sleep, that's not good, versus day and evening workers. So day and evening workers had no issues with their sleep. Rotators were even more likely, 2.8 times more likely to report poor quality sleep. Right? Night and rotators were 2 times more likely to use medication to help them sleep as well. Falling asleep at work or nodding off, what happened? Nodding off during night shift at least once per week. Right? So people on night shift nodded off at their work once per week. Day and evening, 20%. Night shift workers, 32%. Rotators, 35%. Right? So you can see rotators and night shift workers nod off at sleep more often than not. How come day and evening was included? Day and evening was included because... I can't remember why it was included. Let me think. Okay, I remember why it was included. Okay, so they wanted to know whether people nod off only during the night shifts, right? So rotators work in day and night. Night only work in night. Day and evening, sometimes they work at night shift as well. So for those in the day and evening who happen to work at night as well, 20% of them nodded off to sleep. For the night shift workers, all who work at night, 32%. For the rotators, which work day and night, when they worked at night, 35% of them reported nodding off. Okay, that's what it means. So results of falling asleep at work, nodding off during the day and evening shift. Okay, so this is people who worked in the daytime and evening time. Previously was only worked at night. Day and evening people, 2.7%. Right? Rotators, sometimes they work in the day, sometimes they work at night. If they worked in the daytime, they didn't nod off at sleep as much. Right? Previously was a much higher number. So rotators, when they work in the daytime, they're fine. And night shift, I think they didn't have the results for that. Okay, YNA. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. Why is it that they didn't have results for this? Can you figure out why? There's a logical reason behind it. The reason being because night shift workers never work in the day and evening. Sometimes the day and evening might work at night. Sometimes the rotators work at night as well. But night shift workers only work at night. They never work in the they never rotate and they never work in the day or evening. That's why there's no data for them. Right? We don't have to worry. Okay. Nodding off while driving to work in the previous year. Right? Did you have any accidents? People who worked in the night shift were 3.6 times more likely to have an accident driving to work. Rotators were 3.8 times more likely, right? Both versus the day and evening workers. So day and evening workers, 3.8 times less likely, 2.6 times less likely. These two, more likely. So it's quite dangerous, right? It's quite dangerous when you're, in this night shift and rotator shift. When you drive a car, you have to be careful. You might get into accidents. Okay? Now, when it came to accidents at work, there were some confounding variables. For example, the length of time working at hospital. People who work at the hospital longer are probably more experienced and make less accidents, right? Their age, right? People who are younger, maybe they're not maybe they're not so good at controlling their body. I don't know. People who are older, maybe more mature, or perhaps people who are very old may make more accidents because they forget stuff, maybe. Or people who use alcohol for sleeping. This could also affect you, right? People who use alcohol. This could be a confounding variable. We don't know whether it's the shift work that's causing the accidents or is it the alcohol that's causing them to make accidents. Is it their age which is causing them to make accidents? Is it the time that they work at the hospital causing them to make accidents, right? How long they've been there, right? But after controlling for these variables, so these are other variables that they have to control for. You can do it statistically, but that control statistic is not, how do you control that statistically is not in your syllabus. But what they found was after controlling for those variables that could be confounding the experiment, they still found that 2.5% more accident reports versus the day and evening. So rotators still had more accidents compared to day and evening workers, even when controlling for age, length of time at hospital, and alcohol use. Okay. In conclusion, sleep deprivation and circadian rhythm disruption, right, happens a lot when you rotate your shift work. Errors during work happens a lot, right? So you have to be careful. In the rapid rotation theory, a quick evaluation is that it follows the nature versus nurture side of the debate. Nature, why? Because it's based on the circadian rhythm, right? Situational could be the shift work schedule. Like for example, I showed you my shift work schedule by my boss. I don't decide it, my boss decides it for me. What are the effects of shift work on health, right? It's a correlational studies that are usually based for this kind of information. So it's not causation. You can't prove that shift work causes health problems, right? You can only say that there could be a relationship. right? And because of that, there's a very useful application, which is you can use that information to prevent negative health outcomes. Don't make people work at night for too long. Okay. Accidents. Self-report methods are not scientific methods, right? So they use self-reports to ask the nurses for information. It's not scientific, may not be accurate, can be biased. But application-wise, you can use the information to help employees with their work, right? Structure their work better. Don't let them just rapid rotate between Monday, Tuesday, always, one day in the morning, one day at night, one day in the morning, one day at night. Research suggests that that's bad, right? So that's a good application. Okay, we finished 2. You ready for the third one? Health and safety, right? So what are the errors and accidents in operator machine systems, right? Oof, I should have prepared some water. So technology is basically using machinery to replace human workers. Humans are still the operators of these machines, right? So whether we use technology advanced or not, you still need humans some way or another. And human error can be catastrophic. In your textbook, there's this example of the 3 Mile Island power plant problem, which happened in 1979 in the US, right? Where an employee was switching off the feed water pipe. Feed water, I think, takes away the radioactive water from the plant, right? So the reactor overheated as a result of this for 2 hours. It took them 2 hours and 80 minutes to find the problem. That's a long time when you're dealing with a nuclear reaction. And if you've heard of Chernobyl, right? Chernobyl exploded and has caused a lot of problems in Russia because of human error. There was human error. People made mistakes. There was no proper warning system. And there was engineering flaws in the entire system. So that's a big problem, right? Now, what you want to do is that when you create a system, you want it to be foolproof. Foolproof means that even an idiot using it cannot get it wrong, right? They can't even make a mistake. People should create systems which are foolproof. That means anybody who looks at the system knows exactly what to do, right? If there's a warning light, it needs to say exactly what is the problem. Don't just have a red light blinking and everybody's like, what's the red light blinking about? We don't know, right? This is a scary video. Okay, you can see it. Oh, no, it's not that. Okay, this was a video of an explosion that happened in a kitchen environment. What happened was a kitchen. There was a fire in the oil fryer. And what someone did was he took water and poured it onto the fire. Now, under most circumstances, when you pour water on fire, what happens? It puts out the fire. But when there's fire coming from oil and you pour water, the whole thing just goes up into a ball of flames. And that can be very, very dangerous, right? So that's human error at work. Let's talk about token economy by Fox et al. So token economy is really quite interesting, right? They reward workers with tokens for not having accidents. They did this study at a location of 2 open pit mines and product processing plants in the USA, right? So this was a mining area called the Shirley Basin Mine and the Navajo Mine. Before the study, they recorded the number of days lost due to work injuries was actually 8 times higher than the national average. So there are a lot of work injuries happening at these mines compared to the national average of the US, right? So why is that happening? Why are there so many accidents? How can we reduce them? They also saw that the number of days lost due to work injuries were 3 times higher than the national average. So these mines are going through a lot of problems. A lot of problems are happening at the work. How can we solve them? 5 years prior to the study, 2 people were killed and 1 person was permanently disabled due to errors at work, right? But they don't say which mine is which. So in the study, they don't specify which mine killed people or where one was permanently disabled, probably because they don't want people to, be prejudiced against these mines. Like, oh my gosh, people died at Shirley Basin, I need to work in Navajo, right? So the study, if I remember correctly, doesn't specify which mine was the one with the people who died. Okay. So you can read it here. Before the token economy was instituted, the yearly average number of days lost from worker use on the job in injuries at one of the mines, so they don't say which one, they just say at one of the mines was approximately 8 times the national average. During the 5 years immediately preceding the beginning of the token economy, 2 people had been killed and a 3rd person suffered partial disability at the second mine. So they don't say which one it is, they just say at one of the mines and at the second mine. So we don't know for sure. Probably to prevent prejudice and judgmentalness. Is that a word? Yeah. Anyway, both mines were similar in size, had similar mining procedures and similar kinds of injuries. Participants were all the employees, office workers, engineers, managers, production crew. Right? It was a longitudinal study over many years. So this is one of the rare studies that takes the effort to go through many years, from 1970 to 1983. That's a long time. Number of people in mine number 1 was 197. to 214. So it was not a consistent number of sample. Sometimes it would be ranging, right? Sometimes they get a lot of people to many people and stuff like that. So that was the total sample in mine number one. It ranged. Right? Mine number two started with 450. I think they ended up with 501 in the end. Right? So token economy, you have 4 different worker groups, okay, based on the number of working days lost due to injury. Okay. Group 1 were least hazardous workers. These were office workers. People who work at a desk job don't get exposed to injuries much. Group 2 was foremen, shift supervisors, technicians, engineers. Group 3 were mechanics, maintenance operators, bulldozers, operators, and truck drivers. And the most hazardous group, or Group 4, they are the most likely to get into accidents: electricians, scraper operators, and fuel loop workers. Right? Electricians, obviously, if you're dealing with electricity, there's a good chance you're going to get shocked. Right? So they are likely to get injured. Trading stamps were given with their payslip every month. Right? So if you did not suffer any injury, you would be given a stamp. Right? That's when I say stamp, I mean like a stamp that you can hold physically, a piece of paper, like a stamp that you put on a letter. Okay, and this will be given in your payslip with your payslip every month. No lost time injury, right? No injury requiring doctor's attention. Trading stamps were given according to risk level. So if you worked in an office job, obviously you would get less stamps because you know your job is already not very hazardous. If you worked in a more risky job, you would get more stamps for avoiding any accidents. Group 1 got 300 stamps if they successfully had no injuries. Group 2 had 400 stamps, and Group 3 got 500 stamps if anybody in the group did not have any injuries or lose time during their job due to injuries. Group 4 got 700. If an entire group under a supervisor got no injuries, they get more stamps. So it's like a reward, right? It's a reward. If you don't get any injuries, everybody works well together, guess what? More stamps. And if you adopted safety suggestions or you helped to prevent injury for others, you got 500 to sometimes even up to 25,000 stamps. So let's say someone was about to do an error at work, and if they had gone through with the error, they may have died, and you saved them by stopping it or spotting it in time and prevented it, you get 25,000 stamps, something like that, right? You get rewarded. Missing due to work injury. If you were missing from work because of an injury, right, due to work, right, so the injury has to be caused at work, not at home. If you fall and slip at home, that doesn't count, right? If you fall and slip at work, that counts, right? So if you're absent for 1 to 2 days, you don't get stamps for a whole month. It's pretty strict, right? If you're absent for 3 to 4 days because of injury at work, you don't get stamps for 2 months. If you're absent for 5 to 6 days, no stamps for 3 months. And if there are more than 10 days of absence because of injury, no stamps for 6 months. It's pretty strict, right? If anyone in the group lost time, the whole group doesn't get stamps. So if you work in a group of 5 people and one of them lost time due to work, the whole group won't get any stamps. All of them suffer. So you want to make sure that each of them, look out for each other. If a worker causes more than $2,000 in damages, 1 month up to 12 months, no stamps. Right? So if they cause damages due to the errors at work, they could be either suspended for 1 month, no stamps, or maximum of 12 months with no stamps at all. Failure to report an accident, no stamps for 1 month. Right? So if you did not report an accident, you don't get stamps for 1 month. A lot of rules, right? But clear. 6 weeks prior, before the study, the workers were informed of all the rules and everything that's going to happen. 1 month prior, any worker with no equipment or damage or lost time was given 1,000 stamps, right, to incentivize them. So what could they do with the stamps? They could spend them at local stores on thousands of items, right? They could spend the stamps. Rather than spending money, they would spend stamps, right? 3,000 stamps, for example, could buy something like a spice rack. 20,400 stamps could buy a gas-fired barbecue. So if you could buy a gas-fired barbecue practically for free, all you have to do is for the next 12 months, do not have any accidents at work, and you could buy a gas-fired barbecue. No restriction was placed on how the stamps could be used, right? And oftentimes, the researchers noted casual conversations between people where minors would talk to each other about what they were going to buy next. So it's pretty nice, right? Everybody's like, hey, are you going to buy that spice rack? No, I'm going to buy a diamond earring for my girlfriend. Minors also had to keep track of that safety data, number of accidents, frequency, number of days lost, which indicates severity, and the cost of an injury or the cost of an accident. So what the researchers wanted to do was to calculate the cost of the token economy to the benefit cost ratio, right? Because the token economy is not cheap, right? For the token economy to work, the researchers need to have a lot of budget, a lot of money to ensure that people can, print the stamps, give it out, calculate everything, do the admin work, make sure that people can buy stuff with it, right? So it's a lot of work. is it worth the money, right? Because if you can avoid all the accidents, is it worth spending that amount of money? What do you think happened, right? Do you think it was successful? Yes or no? Giving workers stamps in a mine, did it reduce accidents? Yes or no? What do you think? Yes, it was very successful, right? There was a significant decrease in the number of days lost due to injury for both mines, significant decrease. Cost of accidents and injuries went down. In mine number 1, it was reduced from 294,000 to 29,000. It's a huge reduction. Imagine all the money you save the company. In mine number 2, they reduced the cost from 367,000 to 38,000. Huge reduction again, right? Approximately a 90% reduction in cost of accidents and injuries on average, just thanks to the stamp reward system, token economy system. Cost of maintaining token economy in mine number 1 never went above 13,000. So for spending 13,000, they saved like 200,000. Huge advantage. In mine number 2, for spending 21,000, or they lowered it later on to 11 to 13,000, they managed to save thousands more, right? So it's okay to spend a bit of money if you're going to save more in the long run, right? Conclusions. Token economy benefited everyone. The days lost were reduced, accidents, injuries were reduced, no deaths, no disabilities. Everybody's happy. Mine number 1, the number of days lost was only now 1/4 the national average. Can you imagine earlier on it was so many more times the national average? Now it's barely 1 time, right? 1/4 of the national average. Mine 2, days lost was only 1/12 the national average, even less, right? Very, very little. Workers even appreciated the stamps, right? But this was based on anecdotal evidence. So the researchers did not go around measuring, do you like the stamps? No. They just sort of like heard and they listened to what they were saying, right? Unions, in fact, asked for it to be put into contracts, right? The unions are basically groups of workers who get together and say that, okay, we need these rights. Workers need to have rights. This is our minimum pay and stuff like that. So the union said, why don't we make the stamps a permanent addition to the contract, right? One spouse of a miner whose stamps were left out, she complained and drove 80 kilometers just to get the stamps from the researchers, right? So she wasn't even the miner, she was a spouse of one of the miners, and his stamps didn't come in his payslip, so she drove all the way just to get it, right? My mother is just like that. She's very, as we say in Asian culture, kiasu, right? In Malaysia and Singapore, we say this word kiasu. You cannot lose one. You must get the stamp. If it's owed to you, you must get it. You just can't help but just stay at home. 60 kilometers is quite far. Right? Okay, lastly, let's look at safety promotions campaign by Cope. This, anybody knows what this is called? What is this called? Yes, I know it's French fries and you're frying it, but the way that they're frying it in that deep pan with oil, what is that called? It's called a chip pan. It's mostly used in the UK. I've never heard the word chip pan until I studied A-levels for this, for when I was teaching it. And they came up with this word called chip pan to describe a pan that is used for cooking chips. Wow. Obvious much, but anyway, serves its purpose. Boom! So a lot of fires in the UK are caused by chip pans, right? Chip pan fires. Why? Probably because there's a lot of oil involved in chip pans, right? When you want to when you want to fry chips, you need a lot of oil, and that can result in fire hazards, right? In fact, there's a lot of fire hazard advice specifically for chip pans, not even for fires in general, just chip pans. Safe way to enjoy chips. Choose oven chips, choose microwave chips. Buy a portion of chips from the local chip store. Buy a thermostat or controlled electric deep fryer. Ditch the chip pan, right? Because there were just so many accidents happening because of this. So they were giving all the other alternatives. If you must use a chip pan, what are the safety tips? If the oil starts to smoke, it's too hot, turn off the heat. Never fill a pan more than 1/3 full of oil. Never leave a pan unattended, which is what people often do, right? Make sure the food is dried thoroughly. Don't put any food with water, right? Never deep fry if you've been drinking alcohol or taking drugs, or if you're feeling tired, right? So they have websites dedicated to helping people with chip pan fires, okay? Oh, this was the video. Can I play it? Okay, I can't play it, but this was the video, sorry. Earlier on I described the wrong one. This was the video where a guy drops in water into this fire. There's a fire here, he drops in water and the whole place just goes up in flames. Terribly dangerous. You never do that. Never throw water on an oil fire. Use a fire extinguisher. Chip pan fires are a major cause of domestic fires in the UK. In 1981, they caused 21 deaths, 1,372 injuries from 15,000 chip. Can you imagine 15,000 chip pan fires? That's incredible. To me, that's incredible. I've never had a huge accident in my house in all my lifetime of cooking, right? I mean, I don't cook much, but my mother cooks as well, almost every day. And we've never had such major injuries, right? Minor burns, yes, but nothing that major. 15,000, that's a lot. I'm not sure what people in the UK have, unfortunately, had with chip pens, but clearly it shows that chip pens are dangerous, right? Or people are not using them well. A lot of cost as well to emergency fire services departments, police, NHS. NHS is the National Health System or something, right? I believe it's the insurance system in the UK. I'm not so familiar with it. Okay, so how do you solve this? How do you solve this big problem? Advertising. So a lot of times I find advertising campaigns don't help, but this is one of the rare studies that actually had a positive effect, right? So advertising, what do you do? The COPE suggested two strategies at first. First is prevention, right? How to avoid a fire starting. For example, giving people advice on don't overfill the pan, etc. The second was a containment strategy. Educate people on what to do if a fire happens, right? So there were two strategies. They decided to go with the second strategy instead of the first strategy, right? The reason for this was because if you tell people, hey, don't overfill the pan, all right? Hey, make sure you don't do this, make sure you do that instead, right? People often feel, right, in their own arrogant, self-centered way, that they will never make mistakes, right? We often self-centeredly believe that, it will never happen to me. I will never make careless mistakes like overfilling. And so if that happens in a person's mind, then they're not going to pay attention to this strategy. They'll just ignore it. So instead, they went with the containment strategy. Should a fire happen, what should you do then, right? If it happens, what can you do to put it out, right? So yeah, they rejected the first strategy because in most causes are accidental. People assume accidents happen to others, not me, right, personally. So they would most likely ignore the first strategy, okay? Containment strategy was educating people what to do if a fire happens, showing someone tackling a fire, and it makes you wonder, can I possibly handle that too? So if you show a video of a fire and someone tackling that fire, it might make them ask themselves, I wonder if I was in front of a fire, would I be able to handle it? Right? Often then, because they start asking themselves that question unconsciously, it makes them more receptive to the strategy of prevention. To the strategy, and then that would then help prevent major fires from breaking out, and also they will be more receptive to the advice given in the video, right? So instead of don't do this, which people are more likely to ignore because you're lecturing them on what to do, instead something like, here's what to do if you're unlucky enough to have a chip pan fire. Putting it out isn't easy. So why not remember why it happens in the first place, right? So that makes you kind of think and question and process. The aim was to test the effectiveness of an advertising campaign warning people about chip pan fires. It was quasi-experimental, so they didn't force people into groups. Materials were two 60-second advertisements. Video 1 had the initial cause, which was overfilling of oil, shown in the video. Video 2 showed the initial cause of an inattention, right? So the two videos where the fire happened due to 1, too much oil, or due to 2, inattention. People let it burn and they were not paying attention to it. The actions that were in the video were shown for the actor putting out the fire. This was shown across 10 UK regional television areas from the year 1976 to the year 1984, so longitudinal as well. So, what should you do if a chip pan catches fire, right? What do you think is the right steps to take? This is, I'm not 100% sure if this is the actual video, but this is a video that I found of an advertising campaign for chip pan fires. Can I show it? Okay, I can't show it. I don't know if I have the link for this video. It was actually a really interesting video. So let me see if I can find it on YouTube. Chip pan fires advertising campaign UK. Let's see if it comes up. Okay, so here it is. I don't think I can show the full video because my YouTube will probably stop that from happening. But let's just see a bit of it.
A chip pan more than half full of oil or fat will bubble over when you add the chips.
Okay, so that's what happens. Too much oil, right? Too much oil when you added the chips, and then it catches fire.
To you, first turn.
Alright, so I have difficulty showing the full video because I don't want them to stop my video. So basically, it's turn off the fire, and then grab a rag, a dishcloth.
Till it's damp. Then
make sure it's damp, and
place it over the flames.
Place it over the flames. That's it, right? So you switch off the fire, switch off the gas, Right? If it's electric stove, switch off the electricity, get a cloth, wring it with water, throw it over, so it's damp, and it puts out the fire immediately, right? To save yourself the trouble. Fire, if you don't let it start, you won't have to stop it, right? So rather than lecture people, this shows a woman in action able to put out the fire very easily just by using a wet cloth. I didn't think of that, right? My first reaction would be to use a fire extinguisher, which I don't have at home, right? So someone watching this and they don't have a fire extinguisher, something catches fire, they panic. Immediately they remember, oh, I watched that campaign. Get a cloth, put water in it, throw it on the fire, and it's gone, just like that, right? So I would say this is a pretty effective campaign. I don't know if that's the actual campaign that was used, but definitely that fulfills the requirements of what basically Coke was looking for, right, in his advertising campaign. Anyway, let's continue to move on. Was it effective? What do you think? Showing people those campaign ads. Effective? Not effective? Guess what? It was effective, right? They measured this by using fire brigade statistics, right? Overall, there was a 12% drop in fires in the areas, right? It ranged from 7 to 25% in different areas. So in some areas, 7% drop. In some areas, as much as a 25% drop. But overall, on average, about 12%, right? Which is great, right? Less fires, less accidents. High levels of awareness and recall of adverts, even after some time, right? So after the adverts were shown, people still remembered, hey, yeah, I remember that ad showing us what to do in the case of a fire, and they remember what they needed to do. In conclusion, advertising was effective, right? One of those rare opportunities where I can say it was effective because there was a reduction in chip pan fires. But what we don't know is which part improved, right? Was it the prevention, right? Fewer fires started, or was it the containment? People were better at dealing with the fires, so no need to call for help. So we're not sure, after watching the advertisement, were people preventing fires from even starting, or were people able to contain the fires better by throwing a cloth over it, right? A wet cloth. We don't know. Kopi suggested there was a combination probably of both, right? Increased knowledge, because now you know, okay, don't overfill the pan. And secondly, now I know, oh, should I have accidentally overfilled the pan, I know exactly what to do to contain the fire. Right? Reduced fires are great. You save money and you save lives. So this was this is one of the, this is the kind of research that I love the most. Very practical, pragmatic, right? It has a very positive effect on society. That's what I love, right? So evaluation, errors and accidents, individual responsibility is important, right? Because if you have oversight, bad planning and design, it can affect people at work, right? It results in a lot more accidents when people don't plan designs better. If you're planning for a company, a structure, the way things work, the way the machines work, you need to take individual responsibility to make sure it works well. On the other hand, you can argue that situational circumstances are sometimes outside our control, right? Sometimes you can't control when fires happen, when fires start, or when accidents happen. That's why it's called an accident, right? So individual situational debate, you can debate. Token economy. Now, some people may criticize it by being overly controlling or unethical, right? How can you punish people by taking away their rewards, right? Some people think that's unethical, right? Or how can you have so many rules to follow, so controlling. But it was very highly effective, right? And it was also used in addition to normal safety training, right? So it's very practical. It did not replace safety training. It actually complemented it. So situational, right? The rewards were a situational factor, had a very powerful effect on people, right? Safety promotion campaigns, difficult to control extraneous variables. Why? Because these were just adverts that were shown in people's houses on TV. High ecological validity though, because people were watching it at home, in the place where fires happen, right? Of course, you could say fires happen in the kitchen, but in the home is a general area where they do happen, right? You burn down the house sometimes. And so by watching it at home and being at home, you're more well prepared to deal with fires. After showing the same ad over many years, could people get desensitized, right? If you show someone the same thing over and over and over again, sometimes they tend to just block it out, tune it out, and forget about it, right? Okay, very exciting video. This is a video of me on fire. Oh, no, can I show you the video? Okay, let me see if I can find that video. Afro on fire. It's on my personal account. Oh, there it is. Okay, I can show you this. I can't show you the full video again because YouTube will stop my video. So I do this little science trick where I set people's hands on fire using soap, a Bunsen gas, and oops, sorry, it's a bit loud. You'll hear a lot of screaming, so prepare your ears. So I set people's hand on fire. It's perfectly safe, right? It doesn't hurt at all. We just put gas bubbles on a person's hand and set it on fire. I was just doing this magic trick in my church, entertaining the kids and stuff. And then this is what happened. The guy who I was entertaining, he dropped his fire hand into the bucket. And then the whole bucket caught fire, right? Which has never happened. People don't usually drop their hands in the bucket and it doesn't catch fire. And me, being the brilliant scientist that I was, so I don't know if you can see that. I'll do it in slow-mo. So I, brilliant as I am, instead of finding a fire extinguisher or just letting the fire burn itself off, or putting a cloth with water over the fire as I had seen in the advertising campaign, well, this was many years ago, I blew the fire with air and that displaced the flames and the flames went into my face. So watch that carefully. That's me. Ooh. You hear people screaming. And so my hair was actually smoking. I don't know if you can see the smoke coming out of my hair. This is my friend Alvin. He's just like stunned. He didn't know how to react. There was actually smoke coming out of my hair. You can't see it in this video, but my eyebrows were singed. My mustache was singed. My beard was singed off. The front of my hair, my afro was singed off. Like a little bit of it was burnt off, right? And I just did that, and I don't know if you can see it after it. My hair was slightly out of shape. That was pretty scary, right? So again, please, if you see a fire, do not blow the fire with air. That is a terrible thing to do, right? Get a cloth, throw it over. Okay? So be safe, guys, be safe. Don't make my mistakes. Real life example. Anyway. Sorry. Okay, so that's it for organization, this chapter. Once again, my name is Ross. You can follow me on Instagram if you want. Please help me out by liking, commenting, and subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate all of that. And if you feel generous and donating towards me, I don't earn any money from my YouTube videos at the moment. I do them for free, and I know many students appreciate them. And I'm glad to hear all the wonderful comments and emails that I get. Some of you contact me via email, Instagram, you send me messages, and it really makes my day to hear that my videos are helping you guys out. If you feel generous and you want to give me a donation, you're more than welcome to. I accept PayPal. If you live in Malaysia or you want to send me a bank transfer via Swift, just drop me an email, contact me on Instagram, and I can give you my bank details as well. It's a lot cheaper than PayPal. If you want to send me cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, I accept it as well. Just let me know, all right? Thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time.